Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and like my colleague, I too will speak in English. That's because I'm a Brit. Anyway, I think this is a very timely opportunity to have this discussion. We're seeing advances in our ability to sequence genomes and to understand the information that's contained in them in relation to health and disease. But despite these huge advances, we're still a long way from actually being able to intervene in the progress of the vast majority of conditions and provide effective interventions that will improve the quality or the quantity of life for millions of patients across Europe and around the world who currently suffer from life-limiting conditions. The advances that we've seen in genome sequencing and our ability to develop systems for applying that data into healthcare hold out huge potential. And I come at this issue from the perspective of the patients and families who are currently living with those intractable conditions. And when you start thinking about issues around do we share data or do we protect patient privacy, I think you have to remember that for most patients, essentially, they are already visibly different. You know, they are ill, they are suffering from life-limiting conditions, they are identifiable without reference to their genome as being a different part of the population. And frankly, when you ask most patients who are in this situation, you know, what's your feeling about data sharing? They say, well, if sharing data gives the opportunity for the creation of things that will address my medical needs, that will improve my health, then frankly I'd rather be well than dead. And that's, you know, a non-trivial point, because without the ability to share data appropriately, then avoidable harm will be allowed to happen, and potential benefits will not be realized. Because intractable disease, meeting the needs of patients with intractable diseases, needs novel interventions. It means new drugs, it means new ways of organizing healthcare, it means new ways of bringing together different areas of expertise. And we can't begin to think about that if we can't talk to each other. It's also important in the context of making sure that healthcare is both affordable and sustainable. And in European healthcare systems, which are solidarity driven, based on the notion of equity, we need to make sure that the potential that is realizable through the study of genomics and its application in healthcare is not disproportionately beneficial to the wealthy and the privileged, but that all sections of society stand the opportunity to gain. Now, of course there are threats. Of course there are risks in simply creating vast quantities of data about identifiable individuals and just allowing it to be accessed by anybody. But equally, equally, if there is too restrictive a data handling framework, it will create huge costs, not just financial ones, but medical, clinical, social, psychological costs, because people will see that things might have been done, but we chose not to allow them to happen. We need a data sharing framework that reflects the needs and wishes of patients and citizens, but is predicated on the assumption that appropriate sharing of data is the way forward in addressing European citizens' health needs. And we have to remember that if we adopt this risk-based approach, it almost inevitably will lead us to a notion of one size, one solution does not fit all occasions, because not all genomic data is equally significant. Most of it reveals in isolation very little of value to ourselves or to anyone else. But when you look at the big picture, when you look at it all, you can begin to see the patterns and shapes that will emerge. Any system for data sharing clearly has to be based on consent. But consent must be proportionate to the opportunities and the systems that are being created. Broad consent allows for a wide range of applications that most patients will be happy with and happy to see proceeding. Indeed, if you make consent too demanding, then you are wasting patients' time and energy by going back to them to ask what could generally be seen as trivial questions. Look, you told me you wanted to take my DNA and use it to examine whether or not you could create a cure for my disease. I said yes, now get on and do it. Don't come back and ask me every time you want to look at another set of base pairs to see if you can keep on moving. So it needs to be proportionate, it needs to be appropriate. And of course, we need to recognise that consent is not necessarily the trump card that overrules everything else. There is a public health argument, there are public interest issues that we need to think about, but striking the right balance between the need to know in order to plan and to deliver healthcare, and the need to protect the appropriate degree of individual privacy that will ensure that patients and citizens continue to have confidence and trust the integrity of the system, and so are therefore able to, willing to rather to continue to allow this to happen, is a matter for, I think, public debate and transparency. I think the last thing we want to see as patients is that the opportunity that is created by our increasing ability to investigate and understand disease at the molecular level and to develop interventions that will improve the quality or quantity of our lives. The last thing we want to see is that potential undermined by an overly restrictive and too fearful an approach to what might, in patients' eyes, be thought of as trivial risks to our future. Now, I'd like to end by quoting one of our members talking about the issue of data sharing and the threats to his privacy. And he said, imagine you're in an airplane and you're flying along and the cabin attendant comes along and says, here's a parachute. It's got a 90% chance of failing to open. Would you like to use it? Would you like to jump out of the airplane? Well, no, of course you wouldn't. Until the attendant then says, oh, and by the way, both wings have just fallen off the plane and we're heading to the ground. At which point, the 90% chance of failure with a 10% chance of success becomes the preferred option. So what we need to do is make sure from the patient's perspective that they have all the information they need in order to commit to sharing or to make another choice if they prefer to. Thank you.